Chapter 4. The Dark Secret of Picade. Greetings, friends, the stranger said as he approached the company. It seems my arrival was not a moment too soon. I pray no one was hurt. The mysterious stranger pulled back his hood to reveal his face. He was a handsome individual, apparently of elven descent. His long hair was the shade of the night sky above them. His alabaster skin was without blemish. He looked to be only a few years older than Cerberus, although age is a hard thing to judge in elves. "We are fine," Picade replied, a little bit shaken, but fine nonetheless. "To whom can we give credit for our good fortune?" "I am Demetrius of Picade," the elf said as he extended his hand to Picade. Picade introduced himself and the others of his company as he shook Demetrius's hand. "Tell me, Demetrius, have you seen?" Cerberus started to ask. "Your brother?" The Picadian finished the prince's question. "He arrived at the city with my sister, Andorra, earlier this evening." "So, he is safe?" Cerberus asked. "Oh, he is quite safe," Demetrius replied. "In fact, I would venture to say he is enjoying himself a great deal right now. Our city is quite a wonderful place. But how did he make it through this chasm without falling prey to the gargoyles?" Lorien asked. "With this," Demetrius said as he held out the horn of a ram. "My sister has one just like it. The sound it makes drives away the gargoyles, as you just saw. Your brother mentioned that you would probably be coming for him, so I left at once to make sure you meant no harm. I see now that it is a good thing I came to meet you." "It was a good thing indeed," Picade agreed. "Tell me, Demetrius, are we far from your city?" "Not far at all," the Picadian answered. "I am sure you are eager to see your friend. Come, let us get on our way before those beasts return." "That sounds like a fine idea," Fendale muttered, as he glanced up at the sky to make sure the effects of the horn had not worn off. Demetrius led the travelers under the archway and into yet another cavernous mountain corridor. Picade had an uneasy feeling about their strange new guide. There were many questions in his mind concerning the Lost Kingdom and its enigmatic people. "So Picade has not fallen into desolation?" the commander asked. "Oh, by no means," Demetrius replied. "The city still thrives just as it always has." "That is odd," Picade remarked. "Rumors of your kingdom's fall abound in the outside world. Stranger still is the fact that everyone who tries to reach Picade mysteriously disappears, almost as if some form of evil is unleashed upon them." "The evil of which you speak should be no mystery to you," Demetrius said. "You encountered it yourselves. It is the gargoyles. However, I understand your concerns, my friend. Ever since we ended our dealings with the outside world, we have been looked upon with great suspicion. I have come to realize that it is not the people of Picade the outside world fears, but rather the fabled fate that supposedly befell our kingdom. The falsely reported details of our demise have been greatly exaggerated, yet it is these details that continue to lure people to Picade. Some come seeking answers to the mystery they have built in their minds, while others come seeking to rob us of our riches. But none make it to our city. The gargoyles see to that." "You seem like a kind and generous people," Lorien observed. "Why did you suddenly become so reclusive?" "We are indeed a kind people, and we wish to stay that way," Demetrius replied. "The world you live in has grown corrupt, tainted by greed and envy. The dark motives that draw so many people here are a testimony to that. To maintain the purity of our kingdom in the face of such wickedness, our leaders abruptly ended all relations with the outside world many years ago. I must say, the legends derived from our sudden disappearance from the chaos you call civilization have worked in our favor. The fear instilled by such tales has turned out to be a far better defense than we could have ever hoped for. However, it has drawn some unsavory types to us, fortune hunters and the like. We allowed the gargoyles to return to take care of them. However, our isolation is not complete, as in the case of your friend. You see, my sister is a curious soul. She has developed quite an interest in your world. She often ventures out of the mountains and returns with young people, like your friend. Yes, and they never seem to return, Cerebus said in an almost accusing tone. None of them want to return after experiencing the peace and tranquility of our kingdom, Demetrius explained. I dare say you might not wish to go back either, once you are touched by the serene beauty of Picade. Soon the travelers came to the end of the tunnel. The archway under which the knights stood had been cut into the face of a sheer cliff. Beyond the opening was a large valley. The city Demetrius spoke of was built on a plateau near the center of the glen. An enormous stone bridge spanned the valley, connecting the raised city to the mountain corridor. Watch your step, my friends, Demetrius warned. The ground is far below us. A fall from a height such as this would be most deadly. The travelers heeded their guide's warning and walked near the center of the broad causeway. As the warriors made their way across the bridge, they stared down into the mist below. The contrast between the dark sky and the luminous sea of fog provided for a most eerie scene. The fog always rolls in late in the evening, Demetrius explained. It looks rather ominous, but beneath it are beautiful rolling fields and orchards. In the morning, it will not look nearly as threatening. As they entered the ancient city, the knights were amazed at how much activity there was at that late hour. The streets were filled with people dressed in white, all going out of their way to welcome the warriors to the city. They certainly are a friendly bunch, Vendale remarked. And beautiful, Lorien added as he gazed into a crowd of alluring maidens. The physical attributes of the Picadians were so perfect as to nearly be uncanny. Of all the people the knights saw, not one possessed an appearance that would be considered below average, female or male. Everything about the kingdom seemed perfect, too perfect for Iadril's liking. I cannot believe how beautiful your people are, the commander observed. Beauty is all we know here in Picade, Demetrius said. You see, when everyone is beautiful, there is no jealousy. Beauty brings peace and harmony, and that is all we desire. It almost sounds as if you planned it that way, Cerebus remarked. Beauty breeds beauty, Demetrius answered. The fact that we possess such favorable traits is a generous quirk of nature. Generous indeed, Eberhard said as he looked over several of the maidens in the kingdom. Now do you see why people never want to leave here? Demetrius asked. But do not answer yet, for there is much more to see. You have walked a great distance. Surely you desire a meal and some rest. My people will be happy to oblige you on both counts. And we are happy to accept, Iadril said. But first, do you think that you could lead us to our friend Errol? Your friend is resting now, the Picadian explained. It would be a shame to wake him, do you not think? I suppose you are right, the commander reluctantly agreed. Iadril sensed that Demetrius was being less than candid with them. Though the commander continued to keep his suspicions silent, his patience was wearing thin. Of course I am, Demetrius said. In the morning, you shall be reunited with your friend. But now you shall eat. The Picadian led them into a vast mansion near the center of the city. The warriors stood in awe as he opened the doors to a huge dining hall. The room was of awesome proportions. The floors were made of marble. Sparkling chandeliers hung from the ceiling. The knights wondered at the elegance of the chamber as Demetrius led them to their seats. Almost immediately, they were served a vast assortment of fruits and breads, while their chalices were filled to the rim with the finest red wine. You are indeed a generous host, Iadril commented as he looked over the enormous spread of food before him. Are you not going to join us? Cerebus asked the Picadian. I have already had more than my share today, Demetrius replied. Eat well, my friends. There is more where this came from. I do not wish to appear ungrateful, but I would rather retire to my quarters, Cerebus requested. I am afraid that I am just far too weary to eat. Are you sure you do not want at least a drink to relax you before you go to sleep? The host offered. I fear if I become any more relaxed, I may fall asleep right here, the prince said. Very well then. I by no means wish to cause you any discomfort, Demetrius said. Catherine will show you to your room. Demetrius gestured for the golden-haired maiden to come to him. The fair lady took Prince Cerberus by the hand and led him out of the dining hall. "I hope the rest of you do not share your friend's weak appetite," Demetrius said good-naturedly. "It would be a shame for all of this food to go to waste." "You need not worry about that," Vendale said as he stuffed a piece of bread into his mouth. The famished knights eagerly devoured what was offered to them, except for Eadril. The commander had yet to touch his wine, and only ate a few pieces of fruit. Eberhard appeared to share the commander's caution. The other warriors more than compensated for their companion's lack of appetite, eating to the point of near gluttony. The barbaric table manners of the knights were far from characteristic, and they displayed an overindulgence in liquor that conflicted greatly with their usual tendencies. By the time the meal was finished, the physical abilities of the warriors had been diminished to the point where they could hardly walk to their chambers without falling down every few steps. Even the Eadril and Eberhard seemed rather tipsy. However, unlike the other warriors, their actions were a mere act to fool the host. The boisterous knights made a great clamor as they stumbled into their rooms. The generosity of their Pallacadian host was further displayed as he gave each warrior his own sizable room. Before long, the noise died down. The warriors had either fallen asleep or passed out. Judging from all the wine they had consumed, the latter was probably the case. The silence prompted Cerberus to move into action. He had been waiting for a chance to look around the mysterious kingdom on his own, without being at the end of Demetrius's leash. He slowly opened the door to his room and peeked out to see if the hall was empty. With no one in sight, the prince carefully stepped into the hallway, closing the door gently behind him. His immediate concern was the status of his comrades. He searched the rooms around him and found, in turn, Vendale and Lorien. Both were in a deep sleep. He guessed that either Eberhard or Eadril would be behind the next door. As he carefully opened the door, Cerberus was met with a great surprise. The prince saw not one of the knights on the bed, but rather a dark-haired beauty. He quickly turned to leave before the sleeping maiden noticed his presence. However, the maiden was not asleep at all and was very much aware of the commander's presence. "Who is there?" the maiden called out. "I am so sorry, my lady," Cerberus said. "I am afraid I have the wrong room. You have not by chance seen a young knight named Errol, have you?" "No, I am afraid I have not," the maiden said. "Is he a friend of yours?" "He is my brother. I am Prince Cerberus of Teluvia." "It is a pleasure to meet you," the maiden replied. "I am Salacia." "That is a beautiful name," Cerberus remarked. "Are you a Pallacadian?" "No, I am from Pallas," Salacia explained. "It is a small village near the outer gate of Pallacade. Demetrius brought me here a few nights ago. Growing up, I had always been told that this was a place to fear. But now that I am here, I see that it is so beautiful and far from frightening. Do you not agree?" "It is almost too beautiful, if you ask me," Cerberus answered. "But if you will excuse me, I must find my brother. I once again offer my apologies, and I bid you a good night." The prince left the room of the beautiful maiden and returned to his chambers. The encounter had left him wary of resuming his search, for fear of appearing too suspicious. Therefore, he resigned himself to determining Errol's whereabouts the following morning. Shortly after dawn, there was a knock on Cerberus's door. "Come in," Cerberus said. Eadril peered into the room and saw Prince Cerberus sitting in a chair, sharpening his knife. "I was wondering when you would find your way here," Cerberus said. "How are the others?" "Lorien and Vendale are out cold," Eadril said as he entered the room. Eberhard followed after him. "I figured as much," Cerberus said. "It seems we were the only ones wary enough to avoid our host's little plot." "Yes, but if we had all declined the meal, it would have looked far too suspicious," Eadril pointed out. "You are right," Cerberus agreed. "I just hope that the drug they used has no lasting effects." "I do not think we need to worry about that," Eadril said. "However, there is much about this place that should concern us. I think it would be best if we had a look around the city, preferably without a Pallacadian escort. I think we would be hard-pressed to find a guide, even if we wanted one," Cerebus said as he pulled back the curtain from the room's lone window. The commander shielded his eyes to ward off the early morning light as he peered down at the street below. "Not a soul in sight," Adriel muttered. "The last activity I saw was shortly before dawn," Cerebus said. Large groups of Palacadians were walking north along this street, as if they were on their way to some common meeting place. Indeed, it seemed as though they were responding to a tolling bell off in the distance. "I heard the bell as well," Adriel said. "I should like to find its source, for I think we might start to find some answers there. However, I think it would be best if Eberhard stayed behind to keep an eye on our friends." As Adriel and Cerebus ventured downstairs, they found that every hall and chamber through which they passed was completely deserted. They walked outside and found the street to be equally desolate. Cerebus suggested they check out the nearby silversmith's shop before heading to the north. The shop's door was not only unlocked, but it was also wide open. However, to get through the doorway, the knights had to break down a wall of webs. "Now this is weird," Cerebus remarked as his eyes scanned the abandoned store. Judging from the accumulation of dust and webs, the store had stood vacant for some time. Yet strangely, all the merchandise still remained on full display. Tarnished silver cups and trays lined the shelves of the shop. "What do you make of this?" the prince asked. "I do not know what to make of it," Adriel answered. "This is incredibly strange." The knights then walked next door to the cobbler's shop. They found the conditions there to be the same as the previous store. All the items were arranged, just as they would be on a typical business day, yet it was evident that neither store had done business in quite some time. Such was the fate of all the stores along the avenue. It did not take long for a feeling of dread to mount within the warriors. It is as if the shopkeepers abandoned their stores in the middle of a typical day and never returned, Adriel remarked. "But why?" Cerebus wondered aloud. "I suspect that if we find the answer to that question, we will find the answer to a great many questions about this place," Adriel said. The knights continued their search by heading north along the empty street. The avenue reached its end in front of the royal palace of Picade. The massive structure that housed the elite of the enigmatic kingdom occupied the northernmost region of the plateau. The huge iron gates of the castle stood wide open, an invitation the knights could not refuse. "Surely Errol must be in here somewhere," Cerebus guessed. The knights continued their hunt for the missing prince within the walls of the palace. The numerous chambers and halls of the lavish estate made it easy to get lost. The warriors would often find themselves retracing their steps and going over much of the same territory more than once. Though it took a great deal of time, they managed to search every room in the castle. Having completed their search, they were forced to accept the fact that Errol was not there. There was still one place within the castle the knights had failed to search, and that was only because of the nature of the structure. The extreme northern portion of the palace housed the tombs of the former kings of Picade. 4 pillars stood before the entrance of the mausoleum. The knights were not eager to enter the sepulchre, but they felt they could not leave without searching it. A far more chilling reality facing the warriors was the fact that the Palacadians appeared to be missing within their own kingdom. The commander lit a torch and entered the darkened vault, with Cerebus following closely behind. Several broad steps led down to the final resting place of the Palacadian monarchs. An irrepressible air of morbidity filled the tomb. Cerebus tried to break the tension by speaking. "The fright of places like this is vastly overrated. I mean, a tomb is a place for the dead. What do we have to fear from the dead?" "It is not the dead that worry me," Adriel replied grimly. "Does it not strike you as odd that the shops on one of the city's main avenues were filled with spider webs, while not a single strand can be found down here? Either the spiders fear this place, or someone has been down here recently cleaning up," the prince said. "Servants are not allowed in such a sacred place," Adriel noted. "The only time anyone is permitted access into a tomb is when a burial is taking place." "So, do you think someone died recently?" Cerebus asked. "We will find out in just a moment," the commander said. The knights came to the point where the hall opened into a rather large room. Stone columns lined the chamber on either side. Soft beams of light entered the tomb from a doorway directly ahead of them. "I do not see any burial vaults," Cerberus observed. "They must lie beyond that doorway," Adriel said. "Come on, let us go take a look." As the warriors passed between the columns, the commander stopped to make an observation. These pillars seemed to be a memorial to the kings. "Let us see whom the latest monarch was to make his resting place here. If the date of his burial falls within this year, then we will know why it is so uncluttered in here." The knights traced the lineage of the kings by following the columns in the direction of the illuminated doorway. Each date brought them closer to the present time. Suddenly, Adriel came to a blank column, his heart filled with dread, for the date on the previous column had been the year Picade suddenly disappeared from existence. It would appear as though the last king's death was either the cause or result of the strange revolution that brought an end to Picade's contact with the outside world, Cerberus surmised. "That could be the case," Adriel said, "but I still have an uneasy feeling about all of this." "Maybe we can find some answers through that doorway," Cerberus said. As the knights passed through the doorway on the far side of the room, they found not the answers they sought, but rather more questions. The warriors found themselves standing on a stone bridge. The ancient rampart was rather narrow, allowing no more than 2 people to walk side by side. With no walls or rails on either side, it looked to be a rather treacherous crossing if one ventured too close to the edge. The span was rather tremendous, over 100 yards in all. The bridge served to link the mausoleum with an entrance in the side of a nearby cliff. They must keep the bodies of their kings in the mountain, Adriel surmised. "Let us see if they keep anything else there." The knights crossed the bridge as the midday sun shone down on them. Having reached the midway point of the rampart, the warriors found themselves above the murky waters of a rushing river. Each step brought them closer to the dark mountain tomb. The archway above the tomb's entrance was inscribed with the following message: "The royal sepulchre of Picade. All who violate the peace of the kings shall meet their doom." The knights were undaunted by the warning and passed through the mountain entrance. The dismal corridor led to a second archway. "I think we have found the kings," Cerberus said. He was right. Beyond the archway was a long vault. Stone caskets lined either side of the room. Adriel and Cerberus passed somberly between the rows of coffins. Looking to his left, Adriel saw a curious sight. The cumbersome stone lid had been removed from one of the coffins. "Over here," he said, nudging Cerberus. The knights walked over to the stone casket. Much to their horror, they discovered that its contents were missing. Adriel knelt down to examine the lid, which had been placed on the floor near the sarcophagus. Cerberus noticed a dark shadow of worry cross the commander's face as he read the inscription on the lid. "Demetrius," Adriel muttered. "Surely it is not the same person who greeted us last night," Cerberus said. "The inscription marks him as the king who succeeded the monarch, whose name was inscribed on the last pillar," Adriel said. "Why was Demetrius's name not placed on a pillar?" Cerberus asked. "According to what is written here, he died less than a year after becoming king," Adriel said. "Could it be that he was the first true victim of Picade's unknown evil?" Cerberus wondered. "I am beginning to think that it is more likely that he is its source," Adriel said darkly. Suddenly, a fierce barking was heard. The knights' eyes widened in fear as they looked up. Rounding the corner ahead of them were 2 ferocious-looking dogs. Only these were not normal canines. Each one had not 1, but 2 heads. The snarling beasts revealed their razor-sharp teeth, all 4 sets of them, as they charged at the intruders. Adriel and Cerberus abandoned their search and bolted for the bridge. The frenzied beasts were closing the gap at a frightful pace. Cerberus, whose pure elven heritage brought with it above-average speed, was several steps ahead of the slower Adriel, who was only a few steps ahead of the monstrous dogs. Realizing that there was no way he was going to outrun the beasts, Adriel drew his sword and turned to face the predators. The commander slashed fiercely as the first bloodthirsty mongrel jumped at him. The commander soon found himself on his back, wrestling for his life against the fierce hound. He sacrificed his forearm in defense of his neck, showing not so much as a flinch as the beast drove its dagger-like teeth into the soft flesh of his lower arm. There was no time for pain. He had to focus all his attention on destroying the beast. The hellish creatures displayed an uncanny intelligence as the second hound continued to chase after Cerberus rather than gang up on the fallen warrior, as is usually characteristic of pack animals. Even the elven speed of the Teluvian prince could not outmatch the furious pace of the savage canine. Cerberus could hear the menacing snarling of the beast as it rapidly closed in on him. He turned to make his stand, but it was too late. Cerberus had misjudged the distance between the hound and himself. Before he could even draw his sword, the two-headed monster was upon him. With a mighty surge, the fierce canine leaped at Cerberus's throat. However, the beast's aggressive tactics worked to its disadvantage. The prince had been standing close to the bridge's edge, and the force of the impact knocked both the predator and prey over the side. Cerberus was lucky enough to grab hold of the stone walkway's edge. The monster was not as fortunate. It let out a mournful howl as it fell into the river below. Cerberus feared he was destined to follow, as his already feeble grip weakened. He glanced down at the ribbon of water below him as he desperately tried to pull himself up. He clawed frantically at the stone rampart as he felt himself slowly slipping away until finally his strength gave out and he could hold on no longer.